Right. So this psalm is the most quoted or alluded to psalm by the New Testament writers, and it's for a reason. Because the Bible, as I said in the debate, is a story about two lords. As you can see there, and this is the New International Version translation, I chose this one because it clearly shows the distinction that you will find with the Hebrew and the Greek, as I will show. So you have the first Lord there in all caps, which behind that all caps is the Hebrew divine name. And as you can see, the second Lord is a lowercase l, because again, the original Hebrew word behind it is a word Adoni, which may sound like or remind you of Adonai, which is another way of saying the divine name by the Hebrew writers, but it's a lowercase l Lord Adoni, which is never used for God in the Hebrew scriptures. Now I'll play a clip here. In other words, my opponents did a video also about this debate, and I will use some clips from their own post debate review.
Carlos, in the debate, he assumes the Masoretic vowel points were accurate. Vowel points are not inspired. I'm going to say that again. Vowel points are not inspired. Number two, the historical context. When Jesus is citing this to the Jews, was the Masoretic text in front of them? No. Now, this is a quote from Michael Brown, who's a Hebrew scholar. This is what he says. This is very significant. He's talking about Tovia Singer. He says, Tovia Singer's whole argument hinges on the Masoretic vocalization, which did not reach its final form until the Middle Ages. As every student of Hebrew knows, biblical Hebrew was written with consonants and vowel letters only. The vowel signs were added hundreds of years later. Let that sink in. Yet both Adonai, used for Yahweh, and Adoni are spelled identically in Hebrew, consisting of the four consonants. So in other words, what they're hinging on is the Masoretic text, which comes later.
All right, so this is a common rebuttal to when we go to this Psalm 110, verse 1. Now, it is more wrong than right. The speaker there, who was not the guy I debated, it's someone else, and this is from their post-debate review of the debate. He says that the vowel points, that is the dots, or the lines you see in the Hebrew letters or consonants, they were added much later, almost some say 1,000 years, maybe 800 years after Christ. That part is true, but that does not mean that the vowel points are wrong or, as he said, not inspired. I believe they are very much inspired, and I will show you why I believe they're inspired. Now, first, though, he used a quote from Michael Brown. Michael Brown is a Messianic Jew, a Trinitarian, unfortunately, I would say, because he should know better because he knows Hebrew. And this quote from the book that the speaker mentioned speaks the truth about this issue. He says, no one would have thought that Jesus was claiming to be Yahweh, since his hearers certainly knew the text by heart as well, that is Psalm 110:1. And since they distinctly heard two different words for capital L Lord, that is the divine name, right? And Lord, lowercase. Adonai, so that's how they would have pronounced the divine name, meaning Yahweh, and Adoni, that title I was talking to you about, translated as my Lord. This clearly contradicts what Brown says elsewhere in this volume 3, because he is a Trinitarian. Brown is actually sort of, I believe, forced into making this claim because of the facts of the Hebrew text of his Jewish tradition. Now, the other reason why I believe the vowel points are inspired in this case, at least, you have the Hebrew consonants, and you see there the points, that is the vowel points, and a few lines. So those are the things a Trinitarian opponent was talking about. Now, you will notice the bottom is the Greek. You have a Greek translation of the Hebrew, some call the LXX or the Old Greek translation, right, of the Hebrew text. Now, that was done hundreds of years before Christ, and you have the Greek New Testament. As we know, the New Testament was originally written in Greek. What do you see down there? You see Kyrios, which is the common translation, Greek translation of the divine name, or O Kyrios sometimes with the article. And then you see the to Kyrio mu. I'm using, by the way, the modern Greek pronunciation. That phrase is translating, properly speaking, ladoni. Okay, so you see up there with the lamed, so the to, that is to my Lord. The point here is if those claims that somehow the vowel points were added later, so therefore, somehow this proves that there's some ambiguity with Psalm 110:1 in the Hebrew, I think are simply false, because the Greek there would read differently. It would read something like Kyrios to Kyrios, not to Kyrio mu. So that phrase in Greek, as far as I know, is never used for God, that is Yahweh, in the Greek translation of the Hebrew. So that shows a clear distinction of not only written distinction, but also, as Brown himself says in this quote, a clear distinction in the way they would have pronounced it at the time.